This video is going to attempt to give you a useful and complete answer to a very valid question. When you're browsing, engaging, or debating with political content on Twitter or X, roughly what percentage of those interactions are not with a real person? Over the last 10 years, how often were you literally talking to bots or people pretending to be your American or Western European neighbors working in this office building, a massive troll farm in St. Petersburg, Russia? We're going to explore who you've been interacting with, what tools they're using, and how much they're being paid to do it. And we're even going to look at some guidelines that a fake social media user has to follow when interacting with you. Most importantly, we're going to go very deep into understanding how misinformation works and why it's a thing. This video is going to be fucking wild, so let's just get on with it. I've been fascinated with postmodern politics pretty much my entire adult life, at least since 9/11. If there's a book about it, it's probably on my bookshelf. I named an entire album after it. This era of existentialism and politics blending seamlessly at a time when there's incredible technology emerging is a very strange place in history that will probably be remembered for as long as humans exist. Politics have always contained a generous helping of bullshit and exaggeration, but what we are experiencing in America and many European countries right now is not that. It isn't hiding from the truth. It is intentional, rampant public obfuscation of truth's definition. It's called the post-truth era, or consensus reality. I'm going to do my best to approach this with as little political bias as possible, because wherever you are on the political compass, whether you agree with me or disagree with me, misinformation is an attack on you. And to understand how and why that works, we have to go back to the turn of the century, as post-Soviet Russia was recovering from hyperinflation and dealing with extreme social dysfunction, and this resulted in a higher per capita homicide rate than anywhere in the world today. In the early 2000s, the Russian government dealt with their social dysfunction problem by getting covertly involved with youth movements and fringe political parties. At the time, a man named Vladislav Surkov was hired as a close advisor to Vladimir Putin. And remember the name Surkov because he is quite possibly one of the most fascinating and important figures in contemporary politics, and I bet that by the end of this video you will agree with me. This might be a little bit of an oversimplification, but Surkov believed that instead of trying to hide truth from people, you attack truth itself. For example, some of the people that Vladimir Putin had allegedly had killed or assassinated ended up turning up alive months or years later. Others were revealed to be Putin loyalists that were suspected to have been killed by radicalist groups that opposed Putin. Putin repeatedly warned of opposition parties staging a false flag operation by executing their own leaders and then pinning it on Moscow, and then both real and fake bloggers speculated on who that might be and what that might mean. So when the time came for Putin's political rival Boris Nemtsov to be shot and killed down the street from the Kremlin the night before a large rally he had organized, the truth was so obscure for people that they just chose their own personal ideal realities. Putin loyalists blamed his critics, and Putin's critics blamed him. And in this thick fog, over the decades, hundreds of journalists were murdered, imprisoned, or deported under Putin's leadership. After the financial crisis, as the Arab Spring and Occupy movements were gaining traction and spreading in the West, Surkov had the Kremlin supporting more youth movements such as the anti-fascist group Nashi and right-wing nationalist group Project Network and Project Set, among plenty of others with sometimes violently opposing ideals. The key difference this time is that it wasn't a secret. The administration was completely open about it. Every group enjoying the financial and political support of the Kremlin now knew that their opponents were too. Every voter whose interests had parity or commonality with one of the groups now realized that a government that they hated or loved was supporting it and the group opposing it, and vice versa. If the run-on sentence that just came out of my mouth is a little bit hard to follow, good. That's the whole point. Imagine being a politically active Russian citizen at the time. It was absolutely confusing by design, and Surkov had realized that the path to definite, unchallenged power is one where objectivity, logic, and truth are removed. You cannot defeat what you cannot define. In 2013, notorious oligarch and leader of the Wagner mercenary group Yevgeny Prigozhin, also known as the saddest thumb in Russia, formally started the Internet Research Agency in St. Petersburg, which was in close collaboration with Moscow and therefore Surkov. So in 2014, the operating budget of the IRA was close to $1 million a month. And the reason I'm using US dollars in this video is because the Russian ruble's value has been kind of all over the place in the last few decades, to say the least. This monthly million or so dollars paid for around 300 employees to write around 30,000 posts. I was lucky enough to find somebody who had this job and who had secretly saved documents, and they were paid what would roughly amount to between $900 and $1,200 US dollars per month. And this is adjusted for inflation, so not really great money. They would typically hire anybody willing to work for a data entry job listing, and then they would be required to sign an NDA before finding out what they would be doing. Allegedly, some of the people that took the job ended up not being able to read or write well, even in Russian, and had to be let go. And most of those who remained found the work agonizing. So the average employee retention was only a few months. So early on, most of this work was done on Facebook or VK, and it was mostly concerned with regional issues, such as puppet accounts pretending to be Russian nationalists living in Ukraine, calling for the annexation of their own country. And some relatively advanced marketing tactics were used. One such tactic was repetitive association. They'd use a specific ugly word or insult with a politician's name constantly, even if it didn't make sense within context. For example, I'm just going to be honest with you here, I personally think that Vladimir Putin's head looks a lot like a pea, and I'm sorry you can't unsee this ever. So let's just call him Pea-head Putin. Obviously, I don't have any sort of thing to tell you about Putin that has to do with peas other than his head looking like one, but Pea-head Putin wants to subjugate Ukraine. Some people believe that Pea-head Putin wants to recreate the Russian Empire and renegotiate the end of the Cold War. Some believe that he's desiring total world domination inside that little pea head of his. Months and years of this over and over might make you take this person a little bit less seriously as a leader. And it's actually effective. And think about where else you may have seen these tactics.
Lion Ted. What's your name? My name's Lion Ted Cruz.
Crooked Hillary.
Sleepy Joe and Crazy Bernie.
But very quickly, within a few years, the IRA program aggressively expanded and set their sights on the upcoming 2016 elections in the United States. When doing research and interviews for this video, I obtained quite a few documents, and my favorite of those documents are the guideline that troll farm workers have to follow when interacting with Americans. And I've had them professionally translated, and I'll share the documents down below. But here are some highlights of how the troll campaign works. So each troll farm employee must make 2 different tiers of troll accounts. And in the first tier, you have to purchase 20 pre-existing Facebook accounts with pre-existing community memberships. So the second tier is newly created accounts that supports the first tier. And the second tier will follow businesses and local politicians, and they're instructed to join Facebook groups and make friends with real Americans. They must upload photos and statuses and life updates and news articles about things unrelated to politics, a minimum of once every 3 days. Nowadays, it's safe to assume that the amount spent on troll farms and bots eclipses the 2016 election cycle. It's more rampant than it's ever been. But even back in 2016, when you go through the reports of the tiny sliver of things that have been proven to be Russian trolling, it's staggering. There are images, videos, posts, entire online campaigns that I personally remember seeing that ended up being 100% intentionally fabricated. If you're an American or European watching this, your political reality and memories are partially manipulated by the Russian government. Oh, and I know, I am very aware that at this point we are all accustomed to hearing the broken record of Russian interference, and depending on your politics, you either imagine Trump using propaganda to steal an election, or you imagine a giant hoax played out by the Democrats. And if you've paid attention to this video so far, contemplating the fact that there is no middle ground or compromise between those two things should hit you like a sack of bricks. It's also worth noting that virtually every populated country has a troll farm these days to try and manipulate their own affairs, including the United States. And while Russia is the proud leader in international psyops, Iran is suspected to have troll farms that are interfering with American politics as well. When people think of Russian misinformation, they associate it with Donald Trump. These troll farms were very involved in Bernie Sanders' 2016 campaign. They were involved in Black Lives Matter accounts and Facebook pages and white supremacist rallies. The goal isn't to make America right-wing, it's just that right-wing influencers and politicians seem to be more, sorry, but gullible when it comes to amplifying misinformation.
You have to wonder why they care so much about money and other resources going to a famously corrupt country. Is it crucial that the money and those resources are actually fighting Putin, or is it crucial that the money and resources do other things. These politicians might have some significant interest in where the money and resources go in that particular famously corrupt country.
Funding a government in Ukraine that's putting priests in jail, sending the army in to close churches.
And coming to a Russian grocery store, the heart of evil, it will radicalize you against our leaders.
So how does this all work? For example, in the last week alone, there have been numerous leaks of U.S. ballot counters of poll workers destroying votes, and those videos were entirely fabricated and filmed by Russian troll farms. How exactly does that wind up on your feed? Okay, so this part gets dark, really dark. Telegram is notoriously filled with CSAM, or child sexual abuse material. In fact, the CEO, Russian-born Pavel Durov, was just controversially arrested in France a few months ago in relation to this, as Telegram proudly ignores court orders, warrants, watchdog groups, or user reports flagging CSAM on its servers. Just one nonprofit group, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, has received over 570,000 reports of CSAM on Telegram. There's a staggering amount of Telegram group chats and channels that obtain the material through hacking or blackmail and then use the chat's file retention to host it while charging users cryptocurrency for an invitation to the chat and access to the content. If there's one positive thing about this, it's that this improvised payment gateway limits the spread of the material and makes it less likely to show up in unrelated channels. But unfortunately, recently, that's changing now too. There are tons of really popular random Telegram channels with hundreds of thousands of users, and they're completely open to the public, and they're in both Russian and English, and on them, anything goes. And please watch the rest of this segment before checking them out for yourself. These channels or groups attract a younger, male, edgy audience looking for content that would otherwise be censored or moderated elsewhere on the internet. And wherever you are on the political spectrum, I'm assuming that we can agree that that personality type is more likely to be a political extremist. So it turns out that more than a few of these channels are set up and moderated by Russian troll farms who feed them a variety of crazy viral videos containing assault, death and nudity, war propaganda videos, political propaganda leaks, and allegedly porn and shares and leaks from the CSAM channels. I wouldn't recommend ever joining one of these channels under any circumstances, as there may be more to this than simply just using illegal content to lure edgy Americans into being fed misinformation. If someone is posting zero-day manufactured political propaganda on X, there's a realistic chance that they have unencrypted thumbnails of all of the media that they've encountered on those Telegram channels stored locally on their computer or phone's Telegram cache, even if they weren't seeking out illegal content and even if they didn't download anything. All I'm saying is that the fingerprints and tracks many of these users are leaving behind opens a lot of opportunity for blackmail or extortion, and I think that there's a chance that there's a bigger story behind that. So our zero-day user shares the leak, in this case saving a video from Telegram and uploading it to X, and this video surfaced 4 days ago on October 31st, showing Haitian migrants claiming to vote multiple times right here in and around Atlanta, Georgia. Now the FBI, CISA, ODNI, to name a few, all flagged it as disinformation using an influence actor. I used creepy facial recognition to find multiple matches of a South African actor. I'm not going to dox him, but I'm pretty sure that this guy was at a film festival in Cape Town a month ago. So AlphaFox78, a popular meme and crypto account operated by an unknown person, also re-uploaded the video to X, and that video got reposted by a lot of suspicious troll and bot accounts on October 31st, and then it was reposted repeatedly by Amy Kramer, the Republican National Convention committee woman for Georgia, and after the very Republican Georgia governor and Secretary of State both told her that it was disinformation, she wrote a novel about her rights and blamed everybody else, and still, 4 days later, has not removed the fake video. Her title legitimizes the video, but hey, let's pause for a moment and acknowledge these X users' freedom of speech, even though it's not a First Amendment issue because X is not the government, but you know what I'm saying. If I were to, I don't know, upload a short clip from last night's UFC event on ESPN, how long would it take X to intervene and remove it? Well, I did, and the answer is 9 minutes. So the mechanism to automatically moderate content is certainly still there, it's just apparently disabled or very slow when it comes to foreign misinformation. You know what we should do? Let's revisit the X/Twitter timeline in the last 2 years, because many of my viewers will remember almost all of this stuff, but it hits pretty hard when you see it all in one place. In October of 2022, Twitter had a fair valuation of about $30 billion, and after a whole year of unsuccessful scheming and negotiating, Elon bought Twitter for $44 billion. Despite being the wealthiest man in history at the time, Elon borrowed about a third of this from lenders like Morgan Stanley, Fidelity, Barclays, and so on. And of course, Elon has not paid back the debt to these banks, and the loan is now widely regarded as the worst buyout deal for banks since the 2008 financial crisis. A month later, banned and suspended accounts were reinstated in mass, including but not limited to accounts that were banned for inciting violence, bots, and confirmed misinformation trolling accounts. Also in that month, Twitter verification was completely overhauled and monetized. You used to require multiple high-level news sources citing you as a notable person to get verification. Now, anybody with a prepaid foreign credit card could easily become a verified member that gets prioritized in the algorithm. Virtually everyone's inbox looked like this as bots overwhelmingly took over the majority of direct message contact on the site. The FTC even got involved, but not as much as the EU, and we'll get to that very soon. January of 2023, the entire misinformation and authenticity team is fired. A month later, API access is closed and put behind an extraordinarily expensive payment gateway. API access allows you to read, connect, and even post without loading the entire user interface and images. APIs are very common, and they are used universally with every social media site, and Twitter was the first to restrict access to it, which is unheard of, by the way. If you're a social media company, you want people accessing your site from things like indexed search engines. That's how you get new users and ad revenue. Even Reddit, who was just recently massively boycotted for restricting API access, allows free API access for academic and educational use. It's also potentially legally problematic to invite users to create and post content to the public and then later decide to lock it up behind a paywall from the public. So using Twitter's API would now cost a user $100 a month for extremely limited use, and a minimum of $41,000 per month for custom use, and who is allowed that is decided privately and internally. What the f***? September of 2023, the entire election integrity team is laid off, and users start noticing that mark as misinformation functionality is no longer available from the website and app. Any and all attempts to limit misinformation have been intentionally removed. A month later, Twitter under Elon, now called X, is being valued at 71.5% less than what it was purchased for just 1 year after the acquisition. It would be fair for you to say, yeah, but who gave it that valuation? Fidelity did, one of the banks who loaned Elon the money and benefited from a higher valuation. November of 2023, allegedly old Twitter usernames that haven't been used in a bit are being privately sold by the company. And Grok is released, the anti-woke AI that has been notably used as a tool to create politically charged AI images. For example, I gave Grok a try. This wasn't deemed a problem. This certainly was. A week before the 2024 election, I tried these queries. Show me a picture of the President of the United States. Okay. Show me a picture of the President of the United States in 2024. Okay, how about show me a picture of the President of the United States who was in office from 2021 to 2024. Show me a picture of the US President who won the inauguration in the 2020 election and proceeded to serve as sitting president until 2024. Who won the 2020 US election? Great job, not sus at all. December of 2023, knock knock, who's there? The EU, and we're opening a misinformation probe. June of 2024, you can no longer see who is liking or interacting with posts. For example, if you saw a post of Kamala Harris eating a live kitten that had 50,000 likes, you could look through those likes and see if they looked like this. Now you cannot. July of 2024, knock knock, who's there? The EU, formally charging X with deceiving users with claims of verified or authenticated accounts that were not verified or authenticated. October of 2024, the block feature is now mostly removed. Also now, in a hilarious feast of irony, a lot of human users got so sick of bots that they started using extensions that block all verified profiles. And a month before the election, the site intentionally broke all of them and restored the bot's freedom to post shit on your timeline. And while I was swimming deep up X's butthole analyzing fake accounts, just 2 weeks before the election, the API access fees unexplainably doubled. And then, just a few weeks ago, a report confirmed by US, former Russian, and European officials shows that starting in 2022, Elon Musk and Vladimir Putin have been secretly in regular contact. Now, this is just my opinion, but this seems a little bit more problematic when you consider that he's also spent $118 million trying to get Trump elected, literally paying people upfront money to sign politically charged oaths in swing states. But there's something way, way more fucked up about this. Elon Musk controls SpaceX, which has billions upon billions of dollars in confidential US military contracts and a direct, constant working relationship with the NSA and Pentagon. I would imagine that somebody visiting NORAD would have to disclose an ongoing relationship with the leader of a foreign adversary and nuclear power, right? The original mission of this video was to find out roughly what percentage of X users were bots. And we do need to define what a bot is first. When I say bot in this video, I'm casting a bit of a wider net than just your run-of-the-mill chatbot. And it's not like using an AI model and human trolling need to be mutually exclusive. To the contrary, after all, any good bot needs to be set up and trained and monitored by a human. So let's make the definition. Any account or user who is using AI or databases to find, like, repost, or generate interactions or content with the intention of fooling human users. So that guy who's a big sports fan who created his account like 2 months ago and only seems to post transphobic stuff, that's a bot. There's no objective way to determine if it's AI or a Russian bot or just some bored 12-year-old, but there's one thing you could be certain of. You are not interacting with an innocent fellow American sports fan named Johnny who just decided to check out Twitter last month. From your perspective, that social media interaction is utterly worthless, and it exists only to obfuscate reality. Obviously, there's no such thing as a social media site without bots, and due to old Twitter's minimal format and relaxed account requirements, many of them found their way there. There are bots that monitor any mention of cryptocurrency, there are follower bots for paid services, and there's really no shortage of opportunists in general. One impressive type of bot that I've encountered a few times is if somebody mentions that they want a shirt that says something or has a specific logo on it, and then a bot responds within a few minutes with a link to a web shop cloning the design or parsing the quote and then pasting it onto a shirt template. So traditionally, these are at best trying to provide a service someone might want, and at worst trying to scam someone out of their money. But these days, with a tool belt of large language models like OpenAI, bots have exploded in both population and capability. On January 7th of this year, something really spooky happened on X. In hundreds of thousands of conversations, debates, and interactions, a whole lot of those people participating in them announced that continuing would be in violation of OpenAI's acceptable use policy. And while the vast majority of those posts ended up getting deleted and cleaned up pretty quickly, you can still find almost daily occurrences of this when a bot is configured wrong. Unlike Elon's edgelord anti-woke grok bot, OpenAI does have some content restrictions in an attempt to prevent misinformation. And while you can try to fine-tune your model around them, when they change a small rule or filter, you risk ending up with hundreds of thousands of seemingly legitimate users apologizing about OpenAI's acceptable use policy. But there's another popular option that I didn't even realize existed until speaking to some software engineers who used to manage them. Dolphin, and more specifically, Llama 370B, which actually was my nickname in high school. So Dolphin is a fine-tuned version of Mistral AI that runs locally and has very few restrictions comparatively, and Llama is an open and highly customizable language model that would allow a hired developer to customize and deploy locally, as in on any computer that has a modern GPU. This makes it possible to remove any and all third-party services between you and your bot, which prevents things like the OpenAI glitch from happening and reduces logging and detection. I spent a few days setting up some of these models, but fine-tuning them was obviously a bit over my head. But I did manage to get them to generate thousands of phrases and responses in correspondence with political news posts from accounts that tend to feed into misinformation frequently. Then I tried to find commonly used adjectives and adverbs that strayed a bit from what you would see in your typical English language conversation on Medium, Reddit, and Facebook. And that could create a scoring system that I could use to indicate or red flag accounts that are AI generated, but sadly, it didn't yield results that I was confident with. The one thing I did realize is that if you make word clouds from Elon Musk's last 2 weeks of tweets, and if you compare them to word clouds from confirmed troll farm accounts, you can't tell the difference. It's useful to search for bots during specific time periods. For example, last year, a team at Queensland University of Technology used grant money to analyze over 1 million tweets during the Republican primary debates. They found that over 1/3 of those tweets were coming from generative AI models, and this was later supported by unassociated studies. In comparison, bot traffic only makes up about 2% of the content on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. Am I the only one having trouble digesting the idea that 1 out of 3 people I'm engaging with are high-tech tape recorders? And it gets way more ridiculous. Earlier this year, the cybersecurity firm Check ran a deep analysis on X's Super Bowl traffic last February and found that as much as 76% was coming from fake accounts, leading to over 17 billion paid Super Bowl ad views that were not actually being delivered to anyone. Just a few weeks ago, while I was already working on this video, a Cyanber report showed that when Elon Musk was positioning himself against Kamala Harris on X, over 40% of the activity was driven by inauthentic accounts. And they had confirmed what I had already learned and mentioned earlier in this video. I'll quote them. 2 distinct bot clusters working in tandem to amplify traffic and drive engagement. And as of last May of 2024, they found that bots had increased on the platform by 10-fold.
Hey, I'm the person who does all the editing and motion graphics grunt work for this channel. It's been an interesting last 10 or 11 days since the election. So a few days ago, I got my hands on this pre-published paper from Queensland University of Technology, which should, at least the pre-published, should be public by the time this video comes out. And they found what appears to me to be pretty undeniable evidence that there was a staggering amount of algorithm manipulation towards right-wing accounts starting in July of 2024. For example, the yellow line here is Elon Musk's retweets, and then the green is the base average of the site. And then boom, look how far this starts deviating, especially once you get right near the election. Okay, I just have a hunch here. Elon Musk endorse Trump tweet. That is literally the day of the unified change point. And here's something that is batshit insane, but not surprising at all to me. The red is Republican retweet counts and blue is Democrat. Here we have favorites. And then by far the most damning of all is the view counts. Look at that. That is nuts.
Here's what I think. This is my personal conclusion, and yeah, it's probably a little bit biased. At this point in time, you should always be asking yourself if social media users or features are separating you from your own instincts or logical conclusions, because this isn't political. The goal is not to make you support a particular party or candidate. The goal is to make you constantly question your own convictions by filling your entire world with conspiracy theories. The goal is to make educating yourself about your surroundings and questioning what's real or not so exhausting that you're too worn down to care that there's lead in your children's drinking water. You're too worn down to care that the American life expectancy has dropped below the average of some developing countries. What politically oriented problems are bigger than those things? This video took some crazy twists and ended up very different than a short 10-minute data analysis on how many X users are bots. And I kind of took some steps that ended up just frustrating me, and it was my own fault. Like, once I started obtaining documents from former Troll Farm employees, I reached out to some journalists to help verify and back up the information. Almost all of them happily agreed and then wanted to publish their own articles about them with their own narratives, which would enter the overall news cycle. And I now realize that you can't really talk about this type of thing without, at least in some ways, fueling it. And I have never wanted to finish and be done with a video more than this one. And as a result, for the time being, I have absolutely no interest in making more content in any relation to politics. So if my channel was an escape from that stuff for you, it hopefully still will be in the future. As you may or may not know, I typically don't do ad reads or sponsorships on this channel, but if you've been watching this video so far and are thinking, wow, I have absolutely no solution on how to read news, then you'll see that this sponsorship actually fits and it will benefit a charity. So a few times earlier this year, a company called Ground News reached out about a sponsorship via email, and just from the description of what it was, I was curious and I checked it out, and I didn't actually respond to any of the emails, but I ended up pretty much exclusively using their site and app for my newsfeed. They are basically constantly sorting through thousands upon thousands of different news stories and then organizing them by political bias, factualism, and potential conflicts of interest. Okay, so for example, here's one of the more common headlines that I saw. Above the headline, you could see that it's owned by a media conglomerate, is high factuality, and leans center. And then over here on the right, you have these using much different phrasing, clearly marked so that you know that they're owned by the Russian government and are low to mixed factuality. There's also a blind spot feature which shows you quality news stories that you most likely missed in your political online echo chamber. Anyway, so I personally use it to streamline information and weed out BS, and if you've watched this video up to this point, you might realize that you need something like that too. And now you probably understand why I felt like this sponsor fit this video so well. And right now, Ground News is giving my viewers 50% off the Vantage plan with unlimited access to everything for a grand total of $5 per month. And this is only going to be available for a limited time, so be sure to use my link, groundnews.com/Ben, to sign up. And guess what? The proceeds for that sponsorship will go to UNICEF's Fund for Ukraine, which will provide critical life-saving services for children and families about to face the additional threat of freezing winter temperatures with limited power and natural gas. So thank you, Ground News, and also thank you to my patrons. If you want to join them, there's loads of unreleased and released music, audio production assets, field recordings, and a vibrant Discord community that provides a monthly songwriting challenge, which results in a monthly listening party on my streaming channel. It's wonderful, and you can join for as little as $1. Thanks for watching. Keep creating. Bye.
My Twitter account was born in May of 2009. It's 15 years old. I have 27,400 followers and 16.6K posts. And this will delete each and every one of them, including the retweets and replies, and scrub everything from all that time.